I got my 12-gauge sawed off. I got my headlights turned off. I'm about to bust some shots off. I'm about to dust some cops off.
What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock NBA, and you might think of Ice-T as that guy who used to rap that now your dad watches on Law & Order, but that does not give him nearly the credit he deserves, because he is so much more than that. He's done a lot of things in his career, but way back in 1991, his band Body Count put out a song called Cop Killer, and to say that that song was a big deal would be a massive understatement. It was literal front page headline news, to the point that Vice President Dan Quayle was on TV reading the lyrics to this song and demanding that Warner Brothers take this album off store shelves.
Die, 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 pig, die.
Think about that. The Vice President of the United States of America is talking about this song. And this was all happening against the backdrop of the rise of gangster rap and then the LA riots, which, as somebody who was a teenager back then, I can say totally changed this country forever. And aside from that, I also think that he did more to bridge the worlds of rock and rap than probably anybody else. So what exactly happened back in 1991 that made everybody so outraged by what he was saying in that song? And what was the lasting impact and influence of Ice-T and Body Count? Those are the questions that I will answer in this video. And really quick, before we go any further, have you checked out my Patreon? Patrons get early access to all my main channel videos and my podcasts. I also do giveaways sometimes. For example, I just gave away a pair of these Eargasm earplugs. And if you want me to review your music, there's a way to do that as well. All you gotta do is join at the $10 and up level. Then every month I do a call for submissions. If you want me to review something, all you gotta do is drop it in the comments of that post. Then I will review it live on Twitch and post it on Patreon for everyone to see. So if that sounds cool, hit the link in the description of this video, and I appreciate your support.
I mean, it throws a lot of people off. They don't get it. But I tell them I was acting on the record. I mean, I never killed no cops. I'm not finna to kill no cops. Right. They're both characters.
In order to understand the impact that Ice-T and Body Count had, I need to back up a little bit and give a little bit of context about what things were like in the late 80s and early 90s. The first thing to understand is the position that rap and rappers occupied in pop culture in general. Specifically, although rap did have some mainstream success, the genre as a whole wasn't really accepted. People were still kind of scared of it, and when it did have that kind of breakthrough mainstream success, it was only the really safe PG-rated version of hip-hop. First of all, Run DMC and the Beastie Boys in the 80s, both of which are awesome, but compared to something like NWA, obviously a lot less threatening. And after them, MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice, both of which went to #1 in 1990.
Can't touch this. Can't touch this.
Anything that was remotely street was just not welcome in the mainstream. For example, 2 Live Crew, you may remember their song Me So Horny. They were actually charged with felony obscenity for their lyrics. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And there was a lot of hand-wringing and pearl clutching about rap in general. For example, the famous Newsweek story asking the question of, has rap gone too far? Ironically, featuring Tone Loc on the cover, who is pretty much like the least threatening rapper of all time. But still, with all of that going on, you could tell that there was something just kind of bubbling below the surface, that something big was changing in American society. As New Republic put it, by the 1990s, rock and roll had become mainstream. The music that had seemed subversive in the 1960s was now safe fare for a political convention. New forms now appeared to replace rock as the subversive music of the moment. Rap came along to fill that void. And maybe the biggest example of that was in 1988 when NWA's album Straight Outta Compton came out, which made a huge splash because of their song Fuck the Police.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad cause I'm brown.
And that song was incredibly shocking because it was the first time that the vast majority of Americans had ever heard somebody talk that way about law enforcement or the justice system, unless you happen to be listening to bands like MDC, aka Millions of Dead Cops. And in the same conversation as NWA was Ice-T, who was one of the earliest gangster rappers, along with some other pioneers like, of course, Schoolie D and Too Short. His song 6 in the Morning is considered to be one of the very first songs in the genre. And after having some success in the underground, he got a major label deal with Sire Records, a division of Warner Brothers, and got quite a bit of media attention as one of the few street rappers with any degree of mainstream popularity. I first heard him on Yo MTV Raps in probably 1988, 89, and I instantly became a fan because I also loved Eazy-E and NWA. And this is before I actually even knew what punk or metal or anything was, and even me being a white kid from like a random middle-class suburb, there was something about that like anger and like rebellious kind of energy that spoke to me. But what I didn't know is that although he was a rapper, he had also gotten into punk and metal as a kid through his cousin. And in 1990, he put a hardcore song called Body Count on his biggest album yet, which was called OG Original Gangster. And I had just been getting into punk and metal at that time myself through Suicidal Tendencies. And I was just shocked to hear that from him because at that time, rap and hardcore just really didn't overlap at all. I mean, yes, there was Bring the Noise with Public Enemy and Anthrax, but really that was about it. These were just two completely separate worlds in the eyes of most people. I thought that was pretty cool, but I didn't really quite know what to make of it. And then I saw him on MTV talking about how he was going to turn that into a whole band that was also called Body Count.
This is like the epitome of, the hardcore scene, and if we can really move this crowd, I think we got it.
I actually saw them in 1991 on the very first Lollapalooza tour, along with Jane's Addiction, Nine Inch Nails, and Rollins Band, and I thought it was really cool. As Ice-T put it in his book, Body Count toured with Lollapalooza in the summer of 91. In 21 cities, 430,000 predominantly white kids waved their fist in the air and screamed, "Cop Killer," along with us. And speaking of Cop Killer, the first Body Count album came out in March of 1992, featuring the song Cop Killer.
Cop killer, fuck brutality. Cop killer, I know your family's grieving. Fuck 'em.
And to say that that song was shocking would be the understatement of the century. Because, like I said, remember that this was a very, very different world than today. Today, we are used to hearing about violence and street stuff and rap songs. We're used to people having this antagonistic relationship with the police. But in 1992, that was just completely off the table. Nobody was saying these things in any sort of mainstream capacity. Most people had never really heard anything negative about the police, let alone somebody screaming "Cop Killer" like that. And even aside from the anti-police angle, like I said earlier, street rap was anything but mainstream at that time. So just hearing about that level of violence in general was still shocking for a lot of people. And looking at it through the lens of today, 30 years later, this might seem kind of ordinary and maybe even uninteresting. But for 99.9% of people in 1992, this was like a sonic assault on everything that they stood for. And the backlash against the song came immediately. First of all, several associations of police officers demanded a total boycott of Warner Brothers and all their different properties if they didn't drop the album. And remember, Warner Brothers is a huge media company. This is the same company that put out Bugs Bunny and Animaniacs.
The combined law enforcement associations of Texas today called for a halt to sales of the album, saying Ice-T may have freedom of expression, but recording company Warner Brothers has a social responsibility. They don't rule out a boycott of other Time Warner businesses, including the Six Flags amusement parks.
The moment that really crystallized to me how big this got was when I saw Charlton Heston, who was like a super famous actor in the 50s and 60s, and then became the president of the NRA. When I saw him on the evening news reading the lyrics, and eventually even the president at the time, George Bush, specifically condemned the song. The point I'm trying to make here is that people were absolutely furious about this song in a way that you really just don't see anymore. anymore. People just do not get this upset about music anymore. Like, imagine the uproar about WAP from a couple years ago, but that times literally 1,000. I mean, you had the president of the United States making a public statement condemning this song.
I stand against those who use films or records or television or video games to glorify killing law enforcement officers. It is sick.
But on the other hand, there were also people saying, wait, hold on, actually, this is an important message.
Take the words literally, you can make what you want to, but if you take the words internally, I think the message is saying that, hey, we have a problem. There's some bad police officers out here, some white, some black.
And it was really interesting for me because my dad, my stepmom, and my aunt all worked in the criminal justice system in various different capacities. And my dad actually was a fan of Ice-T. I went to go see Lollapalooza with him. So I literally watched Ice-T play cop killer with my dad, who was a corrections officer. And so I was kind of confused by that. I had grown up around police and corrections officers as a kid, and all the ones that I knew were great people. It's like my dad and his friends. Right? But on the other hand, I also could tell that what Ice-T was talking about, like that there was something there. So I asked him, I was like, what are NWA and Ice-T talking about? Like, is this a real thing? And he said, yeah, it is a real thing. Unfortunately, there are bad cops out there who basically just act like another gang. And that was kind of the moment that the light bulb went off for me to realize that this was a thing, because obviously me being who I am, I was never affected by it. And for anybody else out there who may have doubted that message, they were about to get a huge wake-up call in the form of the LA riots. For anybody who may not be familiar with what happened there, to make a long story short, 4 Los Angeles police officers were caught on camera just brutally beating this guy named Rodney King. The 4 police officers, as far as I know, were all white. Rodney King was black. It was everything that NWA and Ice-T had been talking about caught on camera. The officers were all charged with assault, and despite the fact that the whole thing was on videotape and had been played on the evening news like literally thousands of times for everybody in America to see, they were acquitted of all the charges. And in response, the people of South Central LA rioted for a whole week, which left 63 people dead, over 2,000 people injured, and just tens of millions of dollars in property damage. To me, personally, in my lifetime, I would say the LA riots, 9/11, and COVID are the 3 most significant things that I have experienced. That's how big of a deal this was. And so if anybody doubted that police brutality was a real thing, the LA riots proved them wrong. As Ice-T put it in his book, on April 29th, 1992, just a few weeks after we dropped Body Count, total vindication came with the uprising. My enemies didn't even want to fuck with me anymore. We'd get phone calls asking me what I thought of martial law. I'd tell them to refer to album 3, track 1. We'd predicted martial law. And so Body Count was vindicated, but at the same time, the damage had already been done. Warner Brothers decided to pull the album and asked retailers to return any of the unsold copies, and Ice-T made the decision to remove the song from future editions of the album, replacing it with a song called Freedom of Speech, which is basically him saying, even though, yes, this was my decision, I have effectively been censored. Freedom of speech doesn't exist for me. And looking back, he wasn't wrong. To this day, Cop Killer is not available on any streaming platform anywhere. As far as I'm aware, the only place that you can hear it is one YouTube video that some random guy uploaded in like 2011. And that could get copyright claimed and taken down anytime. So the song has really effectively been scrubbed out of existence, which again kind of proves that Ice-T was right about freedom of speech. And although he did still have his deal with Warner Brothers, I think the damage had been done to that relationship. And so he left the label, taking Body Count with him. And with that, the rest of the world kind of moved on from Body Count and Cop Killer and, did what they always do, which is find a new current thing to direct their outrage at. And so that may have been the end of the headline news, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Because I think Ice-T's influence was so much more than just a news item that was hot for a month or two. For one, I think Ice-T and NWA deserve a huge amount of credit for raising awareness of the issue of police brutality and just general tensions between police and the black community in America. I think people have largely given NWA their credit, as they should, but Ice-T really has to be in that conversation as well. And if you're younger, you might sort of take this for granted, but I promise you, almost nobody was thinking about this before they came along. And I think it's important to point out that Ice-T was never really anti-police per se. I mean, he's played a cop twice on Law & Order and also in the movie New Jack City.
Ice-T is a detective with the Special Victims Unit He handles New York's most sensitive cases.
And he's always been pretty specific that Cop Killer was only attacking police officers who abused their power.
See, my attitude is that because you have a badge doesn't give you the right to murder me. Once a cop pulls me out of the car and handles me under the law, that's cool. But once he starts beating on me and taking advantage of me, no longer is he in the lines of law. He is now becoming some inhuman person. Now it's just two men out in the street, and one of us got to die, and it's not going to be me.
Now, as somebody who grew up around police and corrections officers, I personally kind of don't love the title of cop killer. Feels like very antagonistic to me, and my emotional reaction to it is like, wait a minute, you're talking about killing my dad? My dad is a good guy. He's on your side. Why does it have to be like this? But at the same time, I recognize that maybe in order to be heard above the noise and get people to pay attention to him and to spread this message, he had to say it in a really extreme way like this, because sometimes people don't listen until you yell and scream in their face. And so in that sense, I do support it, even though I also support the vast majority of law enforcement officers who are doing this job because they sincerely, genuinely want to help people. And so even though I don't love the specific titles like fuck the police and cop killer, I have to ask the question, would we now be so aware of this issue, and would we have made so much progress if they said it in a less extreme way? And I think the answer to that would probably be no. Sometimes you gotta yell and scream. And along with 2 Live Crew, I think he also did a lot to fight against the sort of general idea of corporate censorship, which has truly made a difference in terms of freedom of speech. And to give you an idea of exactly how much things have changed since the era in which he was kind of really waging this battle, listen to this quote from his book. People are always telling me, don't say that, don't say that. I just continue to speak. Every other statement I make in this book won't ever get me a Nike commercial or a Coke commercial, because in order to get big sponsorships from these companies, you have to buy into the American way. You have to say the president is great. There is no racism. And if you're younger, that might sound a little bit crazy to you, but that was the reality 20 or 30 years ago. But now it's basically the exact opposite of that, right? I mean, Colin Kaepernick got a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal for Nike, doing exactly what Ice-T said was guaranteed not to get you a Nike deal. Things have flipped 180 degrees. That is how much of a different world we live in now, thanks in large part to people like Ice-T, NWA, and 2 Live Crew. Their fight really, honestly did make a difference. And Ice-T specifically really did a lot to break down any of the walls between the worlds of rap and metal, or rap and hardcore, because I think actually he's always been kind of more aligned with hardcore than metal, including breaking down a lot of the race barriers on both sides, showing white kids that yes, black people do listen to metal too, and also fighting the stereotype among a lot of black people that metal is white boy music. In addition to Body Count, who have done, I don't know, something like 6 or 7 albums now, he also did the Judgement Night soundtrack in 1993, where he did collab tracks with The Exploited and Slayer. And remember, this was many years before this sort of cross-genre collaboration became a lot more common with nu metal and all the rap rock bands of the 90s and 2000s. The idea of Slayer doing something with a rapper was absolutely unheard of at that time, and actually kind of still is. Body Count also did Warped Tour in 1999, and he did one of the absolute hardest breakdowns of all time in 2006 on the Ice Pick song Real Recognizes Real, with members of Hatebreed, Madball, Agnostic Front, Crown of Thorns, and Sheer Terror. And Body Count has stayed more or less an active band this whole time, despite the fact that they have very sadly lost several members. And keep in mind, all of this is when he was pretty much already rich, and in most cases had already been on Law and Order for a while. So he really didn't have to do any of this. He is clearly doing this stuff because he just genuinely loves punk, hardcore, and metal. And in a lot of ways, I think he really paved the way for a lot of newer rappers like Lil Uzi Vert and Juice WRLD, rest in peace, who were branded as as rappers, but just like him, were really drawing from the worlds of rock and metal as much as anything. And so if you have never checked out Ice-T's career, now would be a great time to do that and put some respect on his name as one of the pioneers in the fight against police brutality, censorship, and somebody who has maybe done more than anybody else to bring together the worlds of rap and hardcore. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. Also, I would like to thank everybody who supports me on Patreon. Patrons get all my main channel videos and podcasts a week or so early. I do giveaways. There's members only channels in my Discord. And if you want me to review your music, there is also a way to do that. All you got to do is join at the $10 and up level, follow the instructions there, and then I will review your music live on Twitch and post it on Patreon for everyone to see. So if that sounds cool, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.